Well, welcome back to the Faith Roots podcast. Lovely to have you with us again. And we're continuing our series that looks at Jesus and the Gospels. We're particularly focusing on working through Luke's Gospel, but the intention is to give you an introduction and an overview to how all of the Gospels point us to Jesus. So today we're in Luke chapter 5. You might want to read the first 32 verses. Luke 5 verse 1 to 32. And you can pause the talk whilst you do that and then come back. But our big theme as we look at Luke 5 is faith. Faith. So first of all, in verse 1 to 11, we have Jesus calling his disciples. Jesus is at the Sea of Galilee and he's preaching, and a big crowd is there, and they're pushing forward to hear him, and they're getting closer and closer, and there's not much space on the shoreline. So in verse 2 we're told that he sees that there's these two empty boats used by fishermen, these brothers Simon and Andrew and James and John, that seem to work as a team together with other people helping them as well. As he goes down to Simon's boat, and he says to him, push your boat out, I'm going to get in. So Simon allows him to. He gets into the boat, he sits down. Remember, that's the pattern was we would stand up to preach and to teach. The practice in Jesus' day was for rabbis to sit to teach, and you'd gather around their feet. So Jesus is teaching, he's sitting down. And he concludes his sermon. And then he speaks directly to Simon. Witness is still there. The crowd's still able to see what happened. He said, I want you to go out a bit further still, out into the water. And I want you to put your nets out and go fishing. Simon responds, Master, Sir, Lord. It's a good start, isn't it? Respect for Jesus, the teacher, the rabbi. But why would a rabbi be an expert in fishing? And so he challenges back. He says, we have worked all night. We have toiled. We have laboured through the night, through the darkest hours of the night. And we haven't caught anything. And I guess it could have been left there. Because, as I said, perhaps Simon is, although he addresses Jesus with respect, is thinking, what does this man think he's doing? What does he know about fishing? And also his past experience. And just on that side point, perhaps you identify very heavily with that sense of I've toiled through the night. Perhaps in gospel work you've been working so hard without seeing fruit. Perhaps that sense in terms of your family, friendships, relationships, other things that have zapped and sapped your faith. You've not seen any fruit from them. Challenging teenager is still a challenge. That workplace relationship is not resolved. That the church still isn't growing. Yet Simon doesn't leave it there. Remember, this is this challenge. How will we respond when God challenges, when God speaks to us, when God disagrees with us, when God says the unexpected, when God asks the unexpected off of us? We've seen how Zachariah responds to the level of cynicism and is rebuked for it. Mary has all of the same questions and challenges when the angel Gabriel appears to her, but chooses to believe and to obey. And that's what Simon does here. He says, Verse 5, but if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. I will act on your word. I can't see any hope here, but I'm ready to obey you. Again, the crowd will have been watching. They go out, they put the nets down, and this time, verse 6, the nets are so full that they begin to break, to tear. And so they call for help to their partners in the other boat, to James and John. And even with both boats working, they're filling up with fish and they're struggling to bring the nets in, and there's a risk of them sinking, but they make it back to shore. At verse 8, Simon Peter realizes what has happened, and he's falling at the feet of Jesus. A form of respect and worship and reverence, but he is saying, leave me. I'm too sinful, too unholy to be in the presence of you. You clearly have great power, great holiness. Everyone is amazed. But Jesus will not leave Simon alone. And he says to him, you don't need to be afraid. Verse 13. You have been fishing for fish, for sea creatures, but now you will fish for people. You will be a fisherman who fishes for men. That Simon is being called away from his nets to serve in this new, greater task of bringing people into God's kingdom. I mean, we might at some point want to talk about the distinctions, the differences between our normal work and vocation, and the fact that God will sometimes call people into a particular vocation to leave behind that work, supported by others, to spread the good news of the gospel. Both works are valid, but there is that important place for those that are called to serve the gospel. My own particular concern is to see people come and serve in the West Midlands, planting churches, helping other churches to get revitalized, acting as urban missionaries, bringing the good news, evangelizing communities in inner city and working class areas. And I'd love to hear from you if that is what God is calling you to do, to leave behind your nets and come and serve fishing for people in this context. But notice as well, we have this sort of image in our head, that Jesus turns up by Galilee, and he just says to the fishermen, come and follow me, and they leave everything. Similarly, Matthew, the tax collector, just leaves his tax collecting booth. We'll see that later, and they follow Jesus. That there's this immediate response, that it's sudden and it's out of the blue, and there is something that is amazing and sudden and risk-taking about it. But also the bigger picture is that there have been all sorts of connections. So Peter has heard Jesus preach. He's not just responding to this person who turns up from nowhere and tells him to leave his nets. He's responding to one who he's heard taught, to the one who has done this amazing miracle. But also we know there's been some back and forth. So read John chapter 1 and you find out that these men would have been with John the Baptist. So they'd seen John the Baptist point Jesus out to them. Perhaps that would apply to some of the other disciples as well, maybe to Matthew, to Levi. And they've gone and they've spent time with Jesus there. And there may have been interaction with Jesus as he comes back to Galilee and as he begins this preaching tour. They may have heard him in their synagogue. They may have seen miracles. They may have already experienced some miracles in their own situations. And that helps us to see that discipleship is about this distinctive, this crucial decision to put Jesus first, to be willing to leave everything behind for him. But also that evangelism can and often does involve this ongoing dialogue, this development of a conversation, this learning, this getting to know who Jesus is before there is a response. Luke then in verse 12 through to verse 16 tells us about another encounter that Jesus has. He meets a man who has leprosy, that infectious skin disease that leads to a numbing and disease of the nerves, so that the person loses feeling, so that it often leads to them being mutilated and harmed and disfigured and losing limbs as well. And this leper comes to Jesus. He falls down, verse 12, and he begs to be healed. Lord, if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean. And then verse 13, Jesus reaches out and touches him. That would have been a huge thing, the idea that someone would make contact. Some of you may remember Princess Diana going and meeting with AIDS victims and reaching out to hug them. Well, it would have had the same impact. So much fear around leprosy. Jesus willingly touches. Now, it's not just the issue of coming into contact with a disease, but touching someone or something that is unclean. And what Jesus is showing there is that whilst the law has uncleanness flowing from the one who is unclean to those who are clean, contaminating them, with Jesus, because he is sovereign, things flow back the other way, that he, by his contact, the one who is truly clean, truly holy, makes things that are unclean clean. I think there's a sense of for us as Christians, recognizing the danger that sin and temptation contaminates. So there's care there, but the other side also is that the power of the Holy Spirit can transform life, so that the cleaning, the holiness flows the other way. And getting a sense of how that works and when it works, it's part of our spiritual wisdom. The leprosy disappears immediately. The man is healed. He is made clean. Leprosy was categorized in the law as one of those things that made you unclean, that separated you out from relationship with others. A reminder, a statement that we live in the mess and the contamination of a fallen world, and we need cleansing. It would have meant that he couldn't have mixed with other people, couldn't have lived with his family, would have been isolated from the community he was from. So Jesus has not just physically healed him, but he's restored him, given him access to worship in the temple as well, all the things that had been withdrawn from him. So there's a cleansing enables reconciliation. You don't want to be with people that are dirty and smelly. You don't want to be in rooms that are just stinking. So when something is cleaned up, it brings restoration and reconciliation. And this man is being restored and reconciled to God and to his family and his community. Jesus sends him to the priest. That's what the law instructed them to do, to get checked out, to confirm that he is healed. He tells him not to tell anyone yet. There is this sense through the Gospels of Jesus wanting to restrict and control people from just going out and talking about him and his miracles. But of course, the word spreads anyway, and more come looking to Jesus. Then in verse 17 through to 28, we have one of the famous encounters. These men that bring their friend to Jesus, and he's paralyzed. They can't get into the house. It's just packed, jam full. And so they find a way up onto the roof. They lift up the roof. Luke specifically talks in terms of tiles being lifted. Mark talks about digging into the roof. Maybe some language difference for different audiences, but the sense is the same, that they break up the roof that have caused all this dust and disturbance inside. And there's Jesus, and they lower the man in front of him, and the Pharisees and Jesus' opponents are watching on. And Jesus observes this man and the friends around him, and he sees faith. But then he surprises them. Instead of saying, "You're healed, your faith has made you well," he says, "Your sin's forgiven." Perhaps a pattern building up here. Uh, Simon recognizes that he is unclean, unworthy of being in Jesus' presence. The leper is ceremonially unclean because of his leprosy. This man may or may not have been aware of it, but his sin is creating that barrier between him and God. And of course, there's then this challenge. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they're thinking, who does Jesus think he is? What's he up to here? How dare he? Only God can forgive sin. Jesus knows their thoughts. And so Jesus says that, is it easier to send this man away telling him he's forgiven or that he's healed? Well, I want to show you that I have got authority to forgive sin. And so he tells the man to get up and walk, and of course the man is immediately able to do that. Jesus has authority. There's a sense here, again, that this is his authority as the Messiah. We often use this passage to show that he does have God's authority. That's very clearly there. But I don't want that to be disconnected from what he was doing as the Messiah, as the one who is fully God and fully man. That is where this authority is coming from, to forgive sin. And we shouldn't just strip this out as a proof of Jesus's deity. That's not how it's meant to be read. We're meant to be building up this story of how Jesus deals with the problem of uncleanness and sin and forgiveness, and how this is all related to faith, to trust in him, to be able to forgive sin. And then verse 29 through to 32 tell us about Jesus calling Levi, or known elsewhere as Matthew. He's a tax collector, and probably what he will have got here is a kind of franchise where he will have paid the Roman authorities so much to be allowed to set up a customs booth, and then to take what he wished for himself, as well as providing the taxes back to them. And that meant that local people administrated it. But tax collectors, they're unpopular. They're seen as collaborators with the Romans. Again, this is someone, tax collectors are often described in the same breath as sinners, often those in sexual sin. So again, there's the sense of somebody who is unclean. There's a barrier here that isolates him from his people, from his community. And if he's isolated from them, then the sense is that he's isolated, he's distant from God. And yet Jesus draws near to him and calls him to follow him. Matthew leaves behind his tax collecting. There does have to be a leaving behind of the sinfulness of the stuff that causes the uncleanness. But that comes after Jesus has called, after Jesus has welcomed, after Jesus has left, after Jesus has forgiven. And then Jesus later goes with Matthew, with Levi. He gets some of his friends together. They're having a big meal, a feast. Now, that part of the house where that kind of feasting would happen would sometimes be, particularly in wealthier, sort of more Roman houses, would have been almost like a public place, and others might have been passing by and looking in. And the Pharisees around, whether they've been invited to the meal or whether they're just looking on, and they complain. I love the way that the NLT puts it. Why do you eat and drink with such scum? And that is the sense here with those that are unclean. Those are beyond redemption. Those that have been cancelled, to use our late modern or postmodern kind of language. And Jesus responds with a kind of a proverbial statement, sort of like a parable. He says, look, you don't go to the doctor if you are healthy. You go to the doctor if you're poorly, if you're sick. And I'm like a doctor. I've come for those who are spiritually sick. And of course, it is possible to sit at home, not calling the doctor because you don't realize that you are ill, that you're sick. And that's the sense here. These self-righteous people were spiritually sick, but they didn't know it. And so in that sense, Jesus has not come for them because they've not been ready to welcome him, to seek his help. And again, we've got this building sort of difference between those who have faith. Their faith starts with a recognition of their own spiritual condition, their need. Without that, there can't be faith, because the faith goes on from there to recognize that Jesus is the one and is the only one who can deal with our sin, our uncleanness, can deal with these spiritual problems and reconcile us to God and to each other. And as we preach, as we teach Luke, what we want to be encouraging people to do is to respond with true saving faith, and to be challenging those that have professed faith in the past. That is something that is true and is governing their whole life relationship with God now. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll be continuing our little journey through Luke next time, when we're going on to the rest of chapter 5 and beyond.